Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Noam Perry. I work with the American Friends Service Committee in the Economic Activism Program. We're an action research center on state violence. You can see our research on our website, investigate.afsc.org. We are joined today. We're here to talk about Pillsbury and East Jerusalem. I know it's not a combination that you hear often, but if you don't know what that's about, you will soon. We're joined today by Fayrouz Sharqawi, the director of Grassroots Al-Quds, which is an amazing organization that supports Palestinian grassroots organizing in Jerusalem, and by Charlie Pillsbury, who is the co-director of the Center for Dispute Resolution at Quinnipiac University School of Law in Connecticut, and also happens to be the great-grandson of Charles A. Pillsbury, who founded the Pillsbury Company. But before I turn to you two, I want to say why we're here. So General Mills is one of the largest food companies in the world. It owns the Pillsbury brand, and it is producing Pillsbury products at the Atahot Industrial Zone. I'll show that. This is the entrance to the factory. This is the entrance to the Atahot Industrial Zone. Atahot is an illegal Israeli settlement in East Jerusalem. It's a part of the West Bank, and it's a part of the West Bank that Israel officially annexed in 1970. The factory itself sits on land that belongs to the Palestinian town of Beit Hanina, which is now part of Greater Jerusalem. And we, the AFSC, were a part of a coalition that calls on General Mills to stop producing on that occupied stolen land. And until they do, we're calling all people and organizations of conscience around the world to boycott Pillsbury products. I'll talk more about the campaign later, but I want to turn to Fayrouz and to give a bit more context. As you can see here on this map, the factory and the industrial zone that it's in are very close. It's just a few miles away from the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, which many of you maybe have heard of in the last couple of months in the news. The land grabs, evictions, and mass arrests in that neighborhood by the Israeli military and police are actually what sparked the war on Gaza last month. So I want to turn to Fayrouz. And first of all, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's very late in Jerusalem. And give us a brief overview of what's going on in Jerusalem and elsewhere these days.
Thank you, Noam, and hello, good evening from Jerusalem. The truth is, the big news today is coming from Ramallah, where there are protests today, protesting the killing of a Palestinian activist by the Palestinian security forces, the Palestinian Authorities police. Nizar Banat was a known and outspoken critic of the Palestinian Authority from Hebron, and while being arrested this morning, he was killed by the security forces. This is certainly a very connected context, actually, to what the bigger conversation that we are having today. Protests have been taking place all over Palestine recently, not only in Jerusalem, but specifically in Jerusalem. And as you said, what sparked the latest uprising all over Palestine was the story of Sheikh Jarrah, where Palestinian families in the part of Sheikh Jarrah called Karm el-Jaouni, 28 Palestinian families, originally refugees, 1948 Nakba refugees, are facing a second Nakba, or third for some of them. People are threatened with expulsion from their homes. These homes sit on lands that settler organizations, Israeli settler organizations, are claiming ownership over, using the Israeli court system in order to so-called legally evict these Palestinian families from their homes. We saw one picture of one person being arrested in Sheikh Jarrah in the slide, and this happens every day on a daily basis in Sheikh Jarrah now. Today also, someone was arrested, Majdi Aish from Sheikh Jarrah, and there are protests ongoing in Sheikh Jarrah against the expulsion of these families. Many stories have been in the news lately coming from Jerusalem. Sheikh Jarrah is one of them. Silwan is another place where also Palestinian families are facing the expulsion from their homes in the part of Silwan called Batn al-Hawa. Also there, the Israeli law is used in order to legalize the expulsion and the dispossession of Palestinian families. Hundreds of Palestinian residents are facing this imminent threat of being expelled from their homes. Around 1,500 people in total in both communities, which is part of a bigger and wider context in an ongoing dispossession and displacement against Palestinians from Jerusalem that has been taking place since 1967. So after the ethnic cleansing of the western part of Jerusalem in 1948, the Palestinians who are left in the city live in the eastern part of occupied Jerusalem. And since the occupation of this part in 1967, the Israeli occupation authorities have been implementing systematic displacement policies against Palestinians. These include the revocation of Palestinian legal status, basically telling Palestinians that they are illegal residents in Jerusalem and sending them out and expelling them from their hometown. In addition, next come the planning policies that include land confiscation, home demolition, and as we hear these days also, the joint actions basically between the Israeli occupation authorities, the government, the occupation municipality in Jerusalem, and settler organizations, which are also supported by the Israeli court system. Again, this triangle works together to systematically evict and expel Palestinians from Jerusalem. Thousands of Palestinian residents of Jerusalem have been expelled from the city since 1967. This has been ongoing, and the fact that we hear news coming from Sheikh Jarrah today or from Silwan, and also Lifta is in the news now again. Lifta is an uprooted village in Jerusalem. Its original residents, many of them live in the eastern part of the city, just a few miles away from their village and their homes from which they were expelled in 1948. They cannot return, and now there are colonial projects planned to be implemented in Lifta. And so I think that it's important to see that this is a general wider story of expelling and displacing Palestinians. Again, I'm careful about the term eviction because I think that sometimes people sitting outside of Palestine might have this impression that it is just a legal dispute and there is a legal case and the family is evicted because a family is legally obliged to leave a certain residence. But while when looking at these cases, specific cases in Jerusalem and elsewhere in Palestine, again, the law is used in order to implement political projects and gain political goals. And we are here today to speak about and I, of course, Charlie, after this will talk about Pillsbury and how it is connected, but it's important to say that this systematic displacement is enabled and funded internationally by governments and corporations that are invested in this occupation. And it's important to speak about international complicity and speak about the responsibility that people have around the world to not to stop enabling and stop funding these projects here in Palestine and the continuous dispossession and displacement of Palestinians.
Thank you so much. I'm sure people might have questions about that. So you can ask questions. I saw already one question. We'll address them later. I want to turn now to Charlie. Charlie, you and other Pillsbury family members recently endorsed our campaign and called for a boycott of Pillsbury products. We'll talk about that in a second, but it's not the first time that you're taking on a major corporation, and also not your first encounter with AFSC. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did with the Honeywell project back in the day? Oh, you're muted, Charlie.
Back in the day, we're talking about the Vietnam War. I actually grew up in the Twin Cities outside. In the summer of '69, actually worked with the American Friends Service Committee in Northeast Minneapolis. And it's then I learned about the Honeywell project. Honeywell at the time was known for making its cameras, its thermostats, but it was also making anti-personnel fragmentation bombs, cluster bombs, that the U.S. used in Vietnam, and then the Israelis have used it as well. And there were those of us who realized it's not enough to just protest what the government's doing. You have to begin to protest how the corporations are profiting from these wars, or in this case, an occupation. And so there was organized in 1970 something called Proxies for People, Proxies for Peace. We stormed the Honeywell shareholders meeting. It went south because there were some disruptions that came from agents provocateurs. People were sure were paid by the FBI, or and so we then organized something called the Council for Corporate Review, and we bought one share of stock in all the defense contractors in the Twin Cities, and then we went to all their shareholder meetings, not just Honeywell. But the argument we made with Honeywell is that war is bad for business. The war's going to end. Now's the time to plan to get out of it. And we certainly had some success. And ultimately, actually, about a decade after that ended, Honeywell actually divested itself of all its defense contractors. It spun them off. I don't know who took them over, but they realized at some point that we were right, that war was bad business. So I think you can't say enough about the power of economic activism and shareholder activism in particular.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. We do the same work today at the Economic Activism Program. So let's move back to today and tell us about how you found out about Pillsbury's or General Mills' involvement in the occupation and why you decided to put your name out and join our struggle.
Well, first, it's important to know that I'm a very active member of the United Church of Christ. And my wife is an ordained UCC minister, and she's also currently the chair of the UCC PIN. So we were both in Cleveland in 2015 when there was a resolution passed by the United Church, a General Synod, that, among other things, called on all entities of the United Church of Christ, including its members, to boycott goods that were identified as being produced in the illegal settlements, in the occupied territories. And at the time, we were familiar with Ahava skincare, with SodaStream products. I think there was also how to claim dates, but that's all we knew, and it's not really till the UN publishes a list, I think in early 2020, that we discovered that it's not just these companies, it's General Mills, and it's not just and they're not making Cheerios in the West Bank. They're making Pillsbury refrigerated dough products in a factory in the occupied area of East Jerusalem that Fayrouz has been talking about. And then I began getting emails from friends of mine saying, "Do you know about this?" And then of course I did at that point. And then you contacted me and said, you would like to say something about it? And I said, yes. In fact, I'll talk to other members of my family, including my brother, my sister, George and Sarah, and two of my daughters, Leah and Lydia, who joined me on this letter, which was published in the Minneapolis Star and Tribune, asking for people to boycott not General Mills, but just but Pillsbury, specifically the products that are being produced, refrigerated dough products. My sense is that these are what they're doing in East Jerusalem is they're making the word for these, what's the word for they use to, excuse me?
The crescent rolls?
Yeah, the crescent rolls, not the crescent rolls, but so much, but again, something that an Orthodox Jew can eat, not
kosher.
Kosher, there we go.
Yeah.
I'm such a goy, I can't remember these things. And, of course, but we don't know that for sure. And as far as we know, and any of these refrigerated dough products, whether they're cinnamon rolls or crescent rolls, or, I used to, as a kid, to just take the raw cookie dough out of the refrigerator and eat it. Forget about cooking. We would just eat the cookie dough. My father was convinced we'd get salmonella. So anyway, I survived that episode. But I don't think right now. We continue as a church and as the United Church of Christ. We are bringing, actually, Shalom. I belong to the Shalom United Church of Christ in New Haven, Connecticut, and we are a lead sponsor on another resolution that's being submitted on a virtual synod in July next month. That's really responding to the cries of Palestinian Christians, particularly Kairos, Palestine. But we are hearing their cry. There have been Palestinian Christians in Bethlehem for hundreds, of years, and there are fewer and fewer. This occupation is squeezing everybody, and our Christian brothers and sisters are saying, what can you do? And we realize we can do more than just support Betty McCollum's bill. That's important. We shouldn't be using U.S. funding to support the occupation. For Israel's security, fine, but not for, occupying the West Bank and East Jerusalem. So this is why we're engaged in this economic activism. So there you have it.
Thank you so much for this. So let me tell folks a little bit about what we've done with the campaign so far. We have a pretty broad coalition. We have American Friends Service Committee, that's us. We have Jewish Voice for Peace, American Muslims for Palestine. We have other organizations, many of the churches, like United Church and others are part of our campaign. And Charlie, you talked earlier about, storming companies' shareholder meetings. So we had a demonstration in Minneapolis, which is where General Mills is headquartered, on the day of their shareholder meeting, to let shareholders know that we want them to answer and be accountable for what their company is doing. We are also, AFSC is itself a shareholder of General Mills, so we're using our leverage as shareholders in that way as well. That was in September. And we did other things. So one thing we did around American baking season, which is kind of Thanksgiving and Christmas, our friends at American Muslims for Palestine, Minnesota, issued a call for people to bake things not using Pillsbury products. And they got some amazing submissions. So you can see some of them here. We asked people to basically boycott Pillsbury actively, right? To bake, but not use Pillsbury. And we invite other people and other groups to join our campaign. This is on the right side here. This is a sticker that you can print on sticky notes. Our friends in Canada made, Canadians for a Just Peace in the Middle East made these design that you can print on sticky notes, and you can put them on Pillsbury products in your local grocery store, educating your fellow shoppers, maybe even getting the store managers to get Pillsbury products outside of this, out of the store, to not have the store carry them anymore. We also have on our website on boycottpillsbury.org, we have a letter you can send to the CEO of General Mills asking him to stop producing on stolen land. So definitely check out that. That's an easy action you can all take right now. And maybe let's turn to some questions. I saw already one question from Marilyn Alwan. Thank you so much, Marilyn, for your question. Should all General Mills products be boycotted or just Pillsbury products? Great question. Of course, if you feel like you want to boycott General Mills in total, that's up to you. We're not in the boycott police. You can decide what makes sense for your conscience and your wallet as well. We are calling right now for a limited boycott of Pillsbury products because of what Charlie said earlier, because you can't tell right now where they're manufactured. And some of the products that are made at that Atawot industrial zone are designated for export. And if you look at a product in your grocery store, most of the time it won't say where it's from. It'll say distributed by General Mills. It doesn't say where it's coming from in the world. So if you want to boycott settlement products, you should probably avoid all Pillsbury products. But again, you're welcome to boycott more than that if you want. If folks have more questions, you feel free to chat them in.
I just would add that my daughter, one of them who signed the letter, said to me, does this mean I have to stop buying Honey Nut Cheerios for my kids? And I said, no, I'm not asking you to stop buying Honey Nut Cheerios. But Pillsbury product, particularly refrigerated dough products, because that's what's happening in East Jerusalem, in these illegal sentiments. So good question, Marilyn.
I know we get that question a lot about workers. So some of the people who work in the factory are Palestinians. In fact, the company, General Mills, when it addressed our campaign in public, said that they're proud to employ Palestinians alongside Israeli Jews in this factory. So we get that question a lot. If that factory closes, the workers might lose their jobs. What does that mean? Do the workers support the campaign? Do these types of campaigns in general hurt Palestinian workers? Fayrouz, do you want to say something about that maybe?
Yes, happily. I get this question a lot. And I hear this excuse a lot that whether international or Israeli factories in the West Bank should be closed down or not because they employ Palestinians. And also, drug lords provide jobs to drug dealers. It doesn't mean that it's a good thing. And I think that it is insane that we have to go into that detail specifically. I think the very straightforward answer to this is these are factories that are built and functioning on stolen land, and they should go. And then these Palestinians should be working in Palestinian factories on that land. This is just one campaign that we should look at as part of a bigger movement for Palestinian liberation. And we Palestinians want to have our own factories that employ our own people. Not to mention that, yes, these people have jobs in these factories, but then again, under what conditions? What have these employees' experiences been, especially, for example, in the last 1.5 years during the COVID-19 crisis? These workers were neglected. These workers do not enjoy good conditions of employment. So I think it is ridiculous to claim that these factories should stay because they employ Palestinians. Israel employs Palestinians, but Israel is stealing Palestinian land and occupying Palestinian land. And these factories should go, and instead of them, and be replaced with Palestinian factories that employ these people.
Thank you. Yeah. And of course, we can add to that the major Palestinian trade unions are also signatories to the BDS call, that call that Palestinian civil society issued in 2005 to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. I see a question from Bo. Have there been any local organizing efforts in Jerusalem? On Pillsbury, not that I'm aware of. I think Palestinians in Jerusalem have enough to, deal with right now, as Fayrouz mentioned earlier. I think it's our responsibility. We're in the United States. I mean, I'm in the United States. Charlie is, Fayrouz isn't. But it's our responsibility to hold our American corporations and government accountable for what they're doing overseas. Chris has a question. Have any stores or groceries stopped selling Pillsbury as a result of the boycott? Not that I'm aware of. We just started that line of action, because we launched this campaign in the middle of the pandemic. We were very cautious. We didn't want to ask people to go into grocery stores and, put themselves at risk. Now that COVID restrictions have eased, a part of the things that our coalition is looking at is trying to get people organized locally and talk to their local grocery stores. Sometimes it's easier if it's a local co-op or grocery store to do that. I invite you, Chris, and whoever wants to do that, you can contact us and we'll help you figure out a way to do that. No, it hasn't happened yet, as far as I know, that a grocery store stopped carrying Pillsbury products. It might have happened and we don't know about it. That also happens. Thank you for that question. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So if that's all, thank you again so much, Charlie, for putting your name out there and being public about this. Fayrouz, for being indulging us. It's 11:30 almost, close to midnight where you are. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all who joined us today. And boycott Pillsbury. Thank you.